As part of a wave of demonstrations taking place all over the world, demonstrators rallied in London yesterday in solidarity with Aafia Siddiqui, a Pakistani doctor who was reportedly tortured in secret US prisons. Hundreds gathered at the Pakistani and US embassies, as yesterday marked the 7th anniversary of Siddiqui's disappearance. Demonstrators are calling on the government to have the mother of three released. Hori Al-Haddad was at the rally and sent this report.
7 years ago, Pakistani neuroscientist Dr. Aafia Siddiqui and her 3 children were reportedly abducted in the Pakistani city of Karachi. For more than 5 years, no one knew of her whereabouts, until she resurfaced in Afghanistan 2 years ago, where she supposedly attempted to shoot a number of US soldiers. But it's a case which is riddled with question, and one which many commentators have denounced as a sham. Now, 7 years on, supporters have been marking the day she was first allegedly detained, with a series of protests and events around the world organised by the Justice for Aafia coalition. As part of a wave of demonstrations and events taking place all over the globe, demonstrators in London rallied at the Pakistani and US embassies in solidarity with Aafia Siddiqui and her family, and called for her release. Asim Qureshi from the human rights group Cage Prisoners said he's been researching Siddiqui's case for years and said it's riddled with inconsistencies and cover-ups.
Okay, they claim that she's a weapons expert, and yet, despite firing at them, she misses every single agent in the room, and she gets shot in her abdomen by a US agent. When you start going through the case, when you start looking at all the different things that the Americans said about her, and then you weigh them up against the facts of where she was, what she was doing, the two just do not marry at all. The kind of lies that have been told in this case are actually unbelievable.
America refuses to speak about the case but denies holding her in a secret prison for 5 years while she was missing. However, Siddiqui's lawyers maintain she was abducted by the Pakistani authorities along with her 3 children and then rendered to Afghanistan, where she was detained by American forces for over 5 years. Siddiqui claims throughout this time she was repeatedly abused, raped and tortured. Siddiqui was recently found guilty of firing on US soldiers while in custody, but many human rights workers and lawyers say this appears to have been a grave miscarriage of justice.
Despite the fact there was a lot of contrary evidence during the trial to say, well, how could the sister have done any of these things? There was no residue fired from the rifle, there was no fingerprints on the rifle. Yet she was still charged and convicted as having attacked American soldiers.
For a long time, not much has been known about Aafia's case. Fahad Ansari, a spokesperson for the Justice for Aafia coalition, says this is because her family was blackmailed by the Pakistani authorities, who told them not to speak to the press.
Unfortunately, a lot is unknown because of the fact that her family, until very recently, were afraid to speak out. Because for the last 7 years they were blackmailed by the American and the Pakistani governments that were they to speak about her case, that they would never see their daughter again or their grandchildren. And now, after her reappearance and her conviction, now they've got the courage to speak out.
Masoud Shajara, the chairman of the Islamic Human Rights Commission, said Aafia's case symbolises almost every form of oppression that some Muslims are facing in the West's so-called war on terror.
Aafia's case actually symbolizes almost every form of oppression that Muslims are facing today. You know, rendition, extrajudiciary sort of tortures, or the issue of not being able to get justice even in court. You know, all these, the fact that she's been harassed and tortured, her children, may Allah protect them, and I hope that they are still alive. But we are very worried about her children, and everything around it is actually symbolizes. But it's not the only case. I mean, we've got cases and cases and cases and cases like hers. You know, I mean, you know, we are right now standing outside the American embassy. This is an embassy which actually says it represents human right, justice and liberty in the world. But the reality is exactly opposite to that. You know, we've got a situation that right now people are put in prison for thought crime. You know, they're actually, you know, all they have done, they have thought about certain things or downloaded the stuff from the internet, and they are seen as terrorists. And in the other side, we got people like Obama get a Nobel Prize for, again, thinking about peace. Nothing else. He's done nothing more.
Cage prisoners and the Justice for Aafia coalition are organising a series of events over the next week to raise awareness about Siddiqui's case and show their solidarity. However, as she awaits the final outcome of her extraordinary case in America, many questions remain and her children are still unaccounted for, with many fearing the worst.